We are live. Welcome back to Senate Education. Those of you who just watched, or watching, you finished a joint hearing with several other committees on the impact of Act 27, upcoming budgets, as well as other educational finance issues. We're now have two really final points of business. 168, which is a bill that I put my name on for the agency. And then S281, one that I also applied for the agency. As I mentioned, I think Senator Hewlett and a couple of other people, what I'd like to do tomorrow is a couple of these bills will become committee bills. At least two. What I'll do is we vote those out and then they come right back to us. And it gives us more options going forward. It also, for example, this, I'm going to probably do one more, the miscellaneous education bill, just my name is on it. It's going to come from all of us. I want us all to work on it. And frankly, historically, I think having one person's, I like having committee bills. If it were 5 or 6 people, Bobby Starr, for example, has a bill he'd like us to include in a committee bill. We're not voting on them to send them to the floor for the governor. We are just voting on them, and then they'll come back. You'll see a list of bills tomorrow, likely up until we have until Tuesday, coming from different committees. It's just giving us flexibility. We did some in ag today, for example. The other thing is next or the week after next, I've asked the Agency of Education to come in to give us an overview of their fiscal 25 budget. I think morning page just at the agency right now, not next week, but the following week, since the House is going to start the budget, but it'll give us some time to sort of get through our other work. Anybody has specific requests from the agency, feel free to maybe send them to Morgan, and then we can send one email about what you might like to see. And of course, questions will be generated after by their presentation, but that's just a heads up. I mean, for me personally, one of the things I'm really interested in seeing is I'd like to see more folks in the agency. I'm interested in seeing if they're going to be proposing more folks for certain things, whether it's literacy, other needs out there on the ground, all that kind of thing. So, anything on that? Great. Okay. So if we could do a walkthrough of S168, an act relating to report on the post-graduation career settlement behaviors of students attending Vermont colleges and universities. Great. It's in our folders.
Beth St. James Office of Legislative Counsel. We're going to walk through S168, which your chair just read the title of. This is a piece of session law. So this is not, the proposal here is not to put it in Green Book. It's to ask the agencies of education, commerce and community development, and the Department of Labor to look at some information and report back to you. So this bill would require those 3 agencies in consultation with Vermont's public and private post-secondary education institutions to issue a written report to the General Assembly on the post-graduation career and settlement behaviors of students attending Vermont colleges and universities. And at a minimum, the report shall include an analysis and discussion of why Vermont is last in the country in percentage of college students who graduate from Vermont-based higher education institutions and stay in Vermont. And a comprehensive plan to increase the percentage of Vermont graduates who plan to live and work in Vermont for at least 5 years post-graduation. And that plan needs to include the following initiatives: better college career pipelines between higher education and employers, expanded career counseling and career development services on campuses focused on Vermont industries and companies, increased campus community ties through service, culture exchanges, and other community initiatives, and incentives, including preferential or streamlined pathways to licensure for graduating students. AOE is going to provide the administrative and technical support for this report, and this act would take effect on July 1, 2024.
We'll have the agency in to talk about this, but do you have anything you want to say right now, Ms. Hedges?
Sure. For the record, Lindsay Hedges, Agency of Education. So I guess just acknowledging that from what Ms. St. James just proposed or presented to you all, I'm sure some of you can answer some of these questions on why Vermont has a hard time retaining students. And some of this work is already happening organically. Really, the goal of this legislation is just to bring everyone to the table. Obviously, the administrative agencies can all work together, but bringing the colleges into the fold and making sure everyone is, sharing information, sharing data, and providing input is really the goal of this.
Any questions right now? Please.
So the question, page 2, line 5, is it the intent to really understand, focus on students who do not essentially graduate from Vermont-based higher education institutes or any higher education? So it's kind of a different perspective. Are we really concerned about whether they're going on to higher ed or whether they're staying in Vermont and going?
Ms. Hedges.
My understanding is this is about retaining students that attend college in Vermont.
At which college?
And college, all colleges.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just clarify.
Anything else? Okay. S-281, which will become either will get passed to 204, it'll be a committee bill. I doubt it will leave like this, but we're gonna vote on the committee bill tomorrow with Senator Starr's information on it. Again, it'll come back to us and we'll edit it, do whatever we want. The vehicle, yes,
For clarity,
Yeah.
just say it might get attached to 204.
it might get attached. Yeah, we could attach it to 204. I'm just looking for different ways to sort of, thanks, to move things. 204's literacy bill.
Yeah.
One thing I learned as chair from old chairs is have a lot of vehicles. Have as many as you possibly can at the end. Ms. St. James, S-281, please.
Okay, we're gonna walk through S-281, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. This is an act relating to educator preparation and evidence-based literacy instruction.
And again, this does not represent my work, and that's one of the reasons I don't want this to go out with my name. I'd much rather have it under a committee bill or another group, since this, I did not put the effort into it. If I could put Ms. Hedges' name on this, I would, as I suspect you played a larger role in it than I. Please.
Section 1 is a findings section. Do you want me to go over that or skip right to the meat of the bill?
Why don't you go over the findings?
Sure, the findings read, literacy, particularly in early grades, is critical for success in future education, work, and life. Roughly half of Vermont students are still at or below proficiency. Research in recent years is clear. We know how to teach reading in proven evidence-based manner, yet outdated practices linger in classrooms and in educator preparation programs. Section 2, there is what section 2 is doing is proposing to add a new section to your green books. So this would be a new statute in Title 16 in the in chapter 51, which is the professional educators chapter, which is where I don't want to say all, but almost all of the licensing details are located. And so this bill really is talking about educator preparation programs. And so section 1710 is entitled Mandatory Completion of Literacy Models. And it requires that on or before January 1, 2025, and again, should you choose to take up this bill, that date, you can move that date to wherever you see fit. All currently licensed Vermont educators employed in a Vermont school shall complete a program of professional learning on evidence-based literacy instruction developed and offered by the Vermont Agency of Education. After, and again, the state can change, after January 1, 2025, all new licensed Vermont educators employed in a Vermont school shall complete a program of professional learning on evidence-based literacy instruction developed and offered by the Vermont Agency of Education within the educator's second year of teaching. So the first section is saying if you are currently licensed, you have to take this, continuing this professional learning, course or instruction offered by the AOE. And then subsection B is saying, once you become licensed, right, we're talking about new licensed educators, you also have to, newly licensed educators also have to take this, professional development. Subsection C requires public and approved independent schools to collect and maintain a file, on file a record of program completion. And educators have to provide evidence of program completion upon the educator's next license renewal. Any questions before we move on to the next section?
We're gonna hear from the agency after this, just so folks know.
Section 3 of the bill is proposing to add a new statute to the same place in Title 16 in the chapter 51, the educator licensure chapter. This one's entitled Results-Oriented Program Approval. On or before, again, fluid date here, January 1, 2025, the Agency of Education shall conduct a review of the results-oriented program approval program to strengthen educator preparation programs, teaching of evidence-based literacy practices. On or before January 1, 2025, Vermont educator preparation programs have to certify that they comply with any updated requirements. The agency is given rulemaking authority here to adopt rules on the results-oriented program approval to enforce this section. And AOE is required on subsection D on page 3 to develop and make available a model examination for use by educator preparation programs to test a candidate's skills in mathematics, English language arts fundamentals, and the candidate's understanding of the importance of evidence-based approaches to literacy and numeracy. And on or before January 1, 2025, that date obviously does not make sense. Educator preparation program shall incorporate the examination developed pursuant to subsection P of this section in their program curriculum.
Who's the candidate?
Someone studying to be a teacher. To become a licensed teacher.
Sorry,
I have two quick questions, please, and thank you. Line C of page 3.
Mhm.
What is 3 VSA chapter 25?
That is an excellent question, and you may become more familiar with that, the more work we do related between state board rulemaking and agency of education rulemaking. That's the section of the Administrative Procedures Act that governs rulemaking. So anytime we're giving someone authority or telling someone to do rulemaking, we want to refer and make sure that rulemaking is done in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act.
Excellent. And my other question is on page 2 around the educators shall provide evidence of program completion on an educator's next license renewal. If we're adding this to the renewal process, is there anything that's being taken away versus is this just going to be an addition?
There's, in this bill,
Yeah.
there's no removal of anything.
Maybe, so just an addition. Okay.
and Secretary Boucher's gonna jump on it very soon.
Okay, super.
Is it kind of sort of connected to your literacy, Bill?
I think, well, I mean, you're gonna know better than I.
Well, maybe when we're done, I can speak to that, but so far not really. I mean, obviously
there's-
literacy,
Yeah, literacy.
yeah, reading,
Right.
so yes.
You want me to go on?
That'd be great. I love it.
Section 4, we're on page 3, line 15, is transfer of rulemaking authority, transfer of rules. Currently, the standards board for professional educators in your green books under section 1694, title 16, is the body that is responsible for rulemaking related to licensing of teachers. This section is a bunch of standard language to transfer that rulemaking authority from the standards board for professional educators to the Agency of Education. It also transfers the rules that are currently adopted to the Agency of Education and requires them to do some work with the Secretary of State's office to memorialize all of that. I will say, I think in having done a little bit more work in the rulemaking area this session, I think should you choose to pursue this, I would suggest adding, a couple other pieces to conform to this, that are more technical in nature, but would support this. And I've actually started a committee bill based on this and have added that language already. So
Great.
your chair has that.
Great. The one that you sent to Morgan and me. Great, great.
Yeah. Technical, just pieces that should have been included when I drafted it the
Right.
first time around, but I didn't really realize that, so I've caught it now. So that's transfer of rulemaking authority. Any questions on that? Okay. Section 5 is an amendment to the Advisory Council on Literacy. This advisory council lives in statute currently in section 2903, which is a horribly named chapter. I believe it's chapter 99, and it's just called general information, or it's just if you choose to do any work in this chapter, I'm going to beg you to rename the chapter. General policy is what it's called. But this is where tiered systems of supports live. It's where the current reading instruction statute lives, and it's where this advisory council on literacy lives. And so this bill is proposing to add 2 members to the advisory council. And you can see those 2 new members would be on page 6, line 9. 2 faculty members of approved educator preparation programs located in Vermont, one of whom shall be employed by a private college or university appointed by AOE in consultation with the Vermont Association of Independent Colleges, and one of whom shall be employed by a public college or university appointed by the Agency of Education in consultation with the university and Vermont State Colleges system. And then the powers and duties language is amended a little bit here, so the council shall advise. Current law has the council advising the Agency of Education, the State Board of Education, and the General Assembly. And this change would require the council to advise only the Secretary of Education on how to, basically on literacy concepts. And then there's a couple, a conforming change on line 6, page 7 there, Agency of Education Secretary. And then there is on page 8, section 6. The other major change here is the Advisory Council on Literacy is currently set to automatically sunset or repeal on June 30th of this year. And this bill proposes to extend its life until June 30th of 2027. And that is why this bill takes effect on passage. Usually you'll see July 1, 2020, whatever year we're in. And because this bill, because the Advisory Council on Literacy sunsets on June 30th, 2024, July 1 would be too late. So we have this bill taking effect on passage. You can also just have that one section take effect on passage and then apply different effective dates to different sections as you move forward.
I'm sorry if I missed it. Was there the addition, who is the reading person? Let's see. Ms. Lesh, are we making a position? Doesn't need to be Ms. Lesh. Nothing in here, correct?
No, and I copies.
Okay, great. All right, so wait on that. Anything else? Yes, please.
At a time when we've got teachers that are overburdened and sounds like financial woes, we've added perks to their hourly sinking shift. I'm just trying to figure out, what's the genesis?
I mean, it's the need for kids to be able to read, write, perform, or all the way through their academic career. So for me, and I think others I know, all of us, we're gonna make an investment. That's the time. And if we don't, it's gonna cost us more dollars in the future, for sure. If kids can't read it and write at grade level, they say 3rd grade, we know it, they're more likely to not make their way through school, more likely to end up in the criminal justice system, or all those
I
things. Yeah,
understand all
so
that,
that's-
just
yeah.
thinking that we keep,
Sure.
we add something,
Of course,
should we take something away from,
yeah,
you know,
Yeah, I mean, the only thing to me that's being added up as a burden to teachers is the taking the modules, but honestly, the modules are kind of cool because they're online, you can do the work anywhere, so you can do it from home, like you don't have to actually go somewhere, I don't know what they're gonna cost. And I don't know who's gonna take on the cost of that, but that would be interesting to know. But I don't know, as a teacher myself, this would have been something I would have really liked to have. Just because reading is, and I was an English teacher, but I also taught foreign language, and I'm hearing more and more from my foreign language colleagues that they're struggling to teach foreign language because their kids can't read in English. So, to me, this is like across the board work that could be really helpful for everybody. So,
And I'm just wondering, Ms. Hedges, has this already been paid for? I mean, the modules, I thought that was the 3 point whatever it was.
Yeah, for the record, Lindsay Hedges, Agency of Education, also happy to be corrected by my other colleagues on the screen here. But my understanding was that these modules, the cost came out of the appropriation from the Act 28. So there's no additional cost to these.
okay, so that's amazing because teachers often have to take on a lot of financial burden when they take courses and although the districts usually reimburse some, but that's a good thing to know, that it won't be a cost to the teachers. It's good.
And these modules are already been going, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
From tech. Any other immediate questions for Ms. St. James? Yeah, please, go ahead.
Sorry, I have one, if I can.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering what the rationale is behind not sharing, sorry, let me find it, so we'll no longer be sharing, I can't find it right now, but we'll no longer be sharing the advisory council of literacies outcomes with the state board and the general assembly, just the secretary of education. I was just wondering what the reasoning was behind that, because that's a change.
Yeah, I'll let interim secretary
Right,
Boucher
okay.
speak to the rulemaking change.
Morgan, you mentioned that we might have to vote on, it's good. Okay, everything's fast. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, thanks, Ms. St. James. Secretary Boucher, thanks for joining us. I think I also see, Mr. Soulier as well as Mr. Proughton. So, Secretary Boucher, floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, everyone. For the record, Dr. Heather Boucher, I'm the Interim Secretary of Education, and joined by my colleagues, as Mr. Chair said, Josh Soulier, our Division Director for Education Quality, and Andrew Proughton, our Assistant Division Director for Education Quality. Very happy to talk with you today about the bill as reported on. And in general, I wanted to start by saying that we're really excited and happy about the literacy bills that your committee in particular has been working on. I think we have some real important shared goals around improving literacy in the state, and we're very excited to partner with you and to be part of that work together. It's just really, it feels really good, and I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Well, thank you. Well, and I'm hearing, and Senator Gulick, floor is yours if you want to say anything about your recent work with Mr. Carolus.
Oh, just that, I applaud Mr. Carolus's assistance with that bill. Today I was working with Ms. St. James on refining some of the language, and of course, Mr. Carolus showed up with this incredible edited version that was kind of ready for prime time, and it was very much appreciated, so thank you.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. I'm very happy about that. So I thought how we would frame our testimony today is just to kind of walk through the bill and give you some feedback. If there are any questions that we had or suggested language, we were just going to offer that today, but we're also very happy to provide in the next day or so a written version of those changes if you'd like those. I know that we worked pretty closely at least on the concepts, as I understand it, together. So hopefully this won't be, we're not talking about major changes here. Does that resonate?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yes, no, I'm glad it resonates with you.
Well, I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, because I know I had read that you had read this one, so I wasn't sure that you had read in this bill, so I wasn't sure who's
Oh, this is very much, this is your agency's work, and we're gonna have it, likely, it's going to either go with Senator Gulick's 204, if it makes sense, otherwise it'll go as a committee bill. We have a couple of other literacy things that will make their way, perhaps together, perhaps, it all depends on how everybody here is feeling, so.
Wonderful. Okay. So one of the things that, and I will note, so when we put together the dates, when we proposed this language, it is, since then it's given us a little more time to think about implementation. And so we're now kind of wondering if some of those initial dates were a little too, adventurous, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Ambitious, aggressive?
Aggressive, perhaps. Yes. So let me jump right in with that. So on or before January 1st, 2025, this is under subsection 1710, that all currently licensed Vermont educators would have completed some kind of program of professional learning on evidence-based literacy instruction. We think that this is alluding to the modules that I heard you all talking about earlier, which is fantastic. So a couple of things we would note there, that it probably makes sense, since we're talking about all licensed educators, more on that in just one sec, that we might extend that one to maybe 2026, or at the earliest, I would say maybe July 1st, 2025, just because a year to make sure that all of our existing 8,000 educators have made this. This seems a tall order, both for us and the field, and in the field in particular. The other thing I might say is that, again, as the team was looking at this more closely, we would really want to distinguish that these are professionally licensed educators, because we have, as you might be aware, we have a fair number of provisionally licensed educators right now in our system. Sometimes what happens with them is that they decide
Jump in
through the
whenever.
provisional process that they're not going to stick around. And so we would want to make sure that these were our licensed educators that were committed to continuing to teach. Josh or Andrew, anything else you'd add on that piece? This was a really good catch that you all provided.
And Senator Gulick has a question.
But I can wait till you all have spoken. That's fine.
Sure, can start. Andrew Proughton, for the record. As Secretary Boucher said, I'm the Assistant Director of Education Quality. Yeah, on the note for provisional licenses, I would also just like to add that many of them are really doing a lot to try to earn their professional level license. So within those 2 years, so giving them a little bit of flexibility. Once they're professionally licensed, then they would be expected to do this. I think that would be very helpful.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. So I can jump in now if that's okay. Unless, Josh, were you gonna say something?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing for provisional licenses. It's so important right now that we get folks into the pipeline of teaching, and much appreciated. I don't see anything in this bill about requiring teachers in the approved independent school world. I know they don't have I know they're often not required to be licensed, but we want all of our kids to know how to read. So is there a way we can require the modules for those folks as well, for folks teaching in other schools?
we'd have to think about how, so one of the benefits, and the way we've written it, or we recommended it as it is that it's really hooked into our licensure system in terms of being able to check who's done it and who's not and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a good question, and one that we'd probably want to come back and like think about how that might be implemented and then come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Because we don't really, as a state, we don't tend to capture that level of detail or provide, because they're not licensed, we don't provide the same type of supports at that level. The supports we tend to provide for the schools are more at like a school level. It doesn't mean that we can't. And I think it's a good point that, these are students who are actually publicly funded that are in these schools, and we want to make sure that they can read as well. So I think that it makes sense. I think it'll just be in the mechanics of how that could be done.
Yeah,
And-
and I just, sorry, go ahead.
And, the free module that we've put together really could, fit the bill there.
It could be absolutely wonderful, and I, just to the point, I received some very, very emotional feedback from some parents in my district who whose kids were at an approved independent school who, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, weren't learning how to read, and the parents kept expressing their worry that their child wasn't reading, and the teacher kept saying, no, it's fine, your child's fine, and eventually was diagnosed with dyslexia. So that's why I'm bringing this up. I just think it would be great for all teachers to have this training, and I appreciate you considering it. Thank you.
Yep, you're
And
very
it's-
welcome.
Can you send us or Morgan, just a sample of the module so we can sort of see what it looks like, what teachers are experiencing? It'd be fun for us to just have an opportunity.
Sure. So I know that there are always, and have been questions about which different directors oversee which different work in our agency. So because the Student Pathways Division houses the curriculum elements, Jess DeCarolis, who you know very well, can certainly work with us and get those to you. So the professional learning technical assistance staff in the agency for literacy are in Jess's division. Josh and Andrew are all about licensure and requirements and endorsements, and then also educator preparation programs, the state approval of our post-secondary teacher preparation programs, which is why you're getting to meet them today. So
Right.
yes,
You would just
the
pass
answer
that
is
along to Ms. DeCarolis. Thank you.
yes. I just want to give you a little bit more explanation. And I'm
Great.
really delighted that you're getting to see other directors today. So very happy about that. The other thing I would say, we have heard maybe some potential pushback or just could you actually, does it have to be the modules? Like they're not credit bearing? Could we have done something else that like the agency approves as like an alternative to the modules? And we're okay with that. If you want to put language in that just says, how do we have it? Like the program that's developed and offered by the Vermont Agency of Education or similar training experience approved by the agency, we would be fine with that. Just wanted to clarify that for us, it makes a lot of sense because they're free. But if there are folks that they've already done something in their training, they'd rather not repeat that, or they've done something that has actually given them credit bearing experiences because the modules are not set up for that. We want to be a little bit flexible with that.
Okay. Did you want to jump in?
How many total hours are there in the modules, Secretary Boucher?
There are six different modules. I will have to get back to you because I'm not entirely sure how long they each on average take to complete. And I don't know if Josh, you or Andrew know that offhand.
Getting a little bit ahead of myself. I believe it is like the full, everything is 45 hours.
Okay.
But then that is including multiple grade levels and stuff like that. So
Okay.
Thank you.
The other thing we thought would be useful is to have maybe an item under here or somewhere that had the AOE generating a listing of all of the licensing endorsements that would require this professional learning. We're still kind of thinking about that, but we anticipate there might be some pushback from, for instance, just as an example, if you are, and I'm not sure I buy this, so we're still kind of thinking about it. But if you are, for instance, a physical education teacher, do you need to take all of these modules? So my sense is that every single educator needs to have a very strong sense of how all students learn to read. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to learn that they should know how to teach reading. And that's what some of these modules are about. But they really need to understand it. And Senator Ulick, just like you said, because reading is fundamental to everything that all of our teachers do. And so for me, it's about like ensuring that all educators, regardless of endorsement, actually have a sense of how kids learn to read, so that you know, with more using the example of physical education, you know, that field has come a long way, and it's not just, you know, goofing around in gyms and like bouncing balls. I mean, like they are reading materials and things too, and so I'd really love it if all of our teachers have this, frankly, kind of basic understanding of how kids learn to read, because I think it's important. But having said that, you know, 45 hours is, you know, a tall ask. And so we're trying to be flexible, but also kind of hold the line that you need to have, we believe all educators need to have at least some components, and we can actually spell that out more. Again, we've thought about this a little bit more, and this is kind of why it's new.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing what you come up with. That'll be great. Do you envision districts giving teachers professional development time to do this?
I think that would be ideal. We hadn't really gotten to that point of what the mechanics would look like, but it certainly could. Or they
5
could,
hours is a lot.
um,
I mean, if honestly, if Bennington College turned and said, you know, we need you to do a 45-hour course, I would hope that they would give a little professional development time to do that.
yeah,
So-
I mean, we can talk, we're open to that conversation.
Okay,
It
yeah.
wasn't, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not saying no, it's just,
sure.
we were trying to hammer out, like, from the state's perspective, what would those mechanics look like? But yeah, and
Yeah, we want people to be able to reflect and not just rush through it. So it, you know,
Right.
take 3 weeks, not a month.
well, and I guess we envisioned that a lot of this could happen during the summer too, but of course, you know, that would bring up issues of remuneration and time. So
yeah.
that's typically not time that the contract extends. So, yeah, I mean, I think that we'd be open to that. Josh and Andrew, any ideas or thoughts on that? I don't know how it's currently going. If they're squeezing it in or what's happening. Because
Yeah.
again, and we can get back to you on that, like what's
Okay.
currently going on, because they're currently doing it. Literacy teachers.
Yeah, and just for reference on the 45 hours, that's through our licensing renewal, that's the equivalent of 3 credits. So that's how it, like 45 hours sounds like a lot, but if we think about it as the equivalent of a 3-credit course, that's where that number comes from. And also to the question, just before we logged on, I was watching on the live stream. There was a question around if this is adding on top of renewal requirements. I think this is aligned where an individual could meet their standard renewal requirements with these modules, certainly. So there could be kind of a double dip there without adding more work for individuals.
Great, thank you.
If I might add a little bit more on that too. So I do think the biggest limitation of the modules is they are set up to be, you know, equivalent, if you will, to the same sort of hours-ish that a 3-credit college course would be, but there is no college credit you get for it. And so that's again back to like, or an alternative, like it needs to be like they'd have to produce a syllabus so that we could make sure that the 5
Sure.
pillars were covered and all that kind of stuff. But we do want to be sensitive to that for some, a free set of modules, we would obviously honor that as part of our professional learning for our licensure process in the state, but it's not transferable like a college course would be or something for teachers. And, you know, we recognize that that's a limitation.
And just for clarity, would these hours allow for a teacher to go up in step on the salary scale?
We haven't touched that.
Right. Okay.
It's everybody.
Um,
It's a requirement for everybody.
That's one last.
Okay, please continue.
okay. So we just have some moving. So some of those same, you know, developed and offered or approved by the Vermont AOE, we'd want to see under the B section 2 under 1710. And actually, C does talk about approved independent schools. So it's implied that they will be doing this work as well. So we just need to clean up that language, Senator Gulick. If you see under C.
Page 3, what page are we on? Sorry.
I'm still on page 2.
Okay.
I haven't gotten very far, sorry.
And we are, just so you know, we are gonna need some written testimony.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
We can get that to you by early next week, if that's fine.
Yeah, we would appreciate that on Tuesday because we're have to move pretty quickly.
Okay. So we'll have some updated ideas about extending so now I'm moving to the ROPA component. So we think it's a pretty impossible task to have both the AOE conduct the review by January, and then also that the prep programs would have the same deadline for certifying what they're supposed to have in their programs. Like we have to have one before the other. So we're asking that instead of January 1st, 2025, we have a little more time. So it's July 1st, a few more months, 2025. And then we'd give the educator prep programs a year. So July 1st, 2026. And this may or may not align with, we know why it was January 1st. That makes sense in terms of legislative cycle, but we're just trying to actually provide a little bit more of a reasonable time frame. So then it would be July 1st, 2026, and our recommendation for the prep programs to certify that they're complying with those updated requirements. Questions on that?
No.
For part D, agency shall develop and make available a model examination or use an existing product. We can get back to you on that. So the idea there would be, it's, you know, there might be a more efficient way to do it if there's already one that exists, which we think there is. And like, that's what we kind of go with, as opposed to staffing the work that it would take to make a whole new kind of, even if it's not like a big statewide assessment, it still is, it will take a lot of work to do that. So we just wanted some flexibility in terms of either the agency will develop and have ready to go this particular testing tool, if you will, or will, you know, use an existing product that already exists. Make sense? Because there are some, like Pearson has some and those kinds of things. They will cost money, but we would at, you know, by next session, we'd have a better chance. We'd have, we'd know better about like what the suggestion would be on what that particular tool is. Any questions on that? So the next section was a little surprising to us, and I will apologize if this went through and it was not something that I'd anticipated, or we'd anticipated, that we would be wholesale moving rulemaking with respect to teacher preparation and or licensure to the AOE from the standards board, and that's kind of how it reads. We do support moving the ROPA component of rules over to the agency, and we think we can actually do that with our current staffing. There's a couple things I would say. If we were to move all of the rulemaking authority that currently is in the standards board over to the agency, we're not staffed to do all that. And I understand why there may potentially be some confusion on this, because in another
But just
bill,
so you know, Secretary Boucher, this is a recommendation from the agency.
yes, I think there might have
Okay.
been some some miscommunication, which I did not
Okay.
catch. And so
Okay.
I'm owning that, and we'll
Okay.
get right language back to you.
Great.
We recommend the ROPA rules process moving over to the agency, because that is more under the agency's purview already anyway. But there really are some downstream, I think, negative effects of moving the entire rulemaking apparatus that's currently in the standards board over to the agency. We don't have the capacity to do it. And also, what I was going to say is that there might have been internally a mix-up for us, because we have recommended that we do move some rule series that are under the other state board of education, which is just the SBE, over to the agency, for instance, CTE, but that's a very different type of state board, as your committee knows. So the standards board, I think we really need that board to, they really are the practitioners in the field. They are all licensed educators that are actually doing this work. And so it seems, to me, it's a bit worrisome. So we'll just retract this, but I wanted to make sure that, the rationale for why the committee heard from me. And I will apologize, because I think we internally had some miscommunication on this in terms of what came through in the final version. So my apologies on that. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes, I think we'll look for that detailed request on Tuesday. Thank you.
Perfect. Yep.
Appreciate
Love the advisory council. Thank you very much. Support the addition of the 2 faculty members in approved educator preparation programs. I think probably the council advising the Secretary of Education came about from, I don't think we're super beholden to this language, but if anything, I think who they're advising, though, would typically be more the secretary, because the secretary is then implementing what to do. So for them, maybe it's more that they're informing the General Assembly and the state board. Does that make sense? Like, some of that language is just.
Yeah, I haven't really given it a lot of thought. I just was wondering what the rationale was. I mean, definite, like, it's more, it's more simple and maybe more streamlined to go through one body rather than to, 3. I get that.
But I also recognize, though, that it seems almost too restrictive. And so maybe what we would recommend is to have, a report annually that goes to the SBE, the standards board. I would also add in there, because this is about, a lot of this is about preparation and, licensure for literacy. So I'm happy if we come back and kind of clean that up a little bit from our perspective, because I would agree this was not meant to be like nobody else gets to see this work except the secretary. That's not what this was for.
Right.
And I can see that it reads that way. That was not the intent. So the other thing I will note is I actually think if we extend the deadlines a little, that we're going to recommend in some suggested edits that we also do put a required update report back to the committees of jurisdiction in the General Assembly. So it's not just we extend the deadlines. Like, for instance, like I'd be very comfortable with putting, by January 1st, we have a report to Senate Ed, House Ed, and whoever else wants that report on the activities leading up to those final deadlines. I think that's a very good model that we've come up with together through the years when we have sort of longer projects like this. If you're okay with it, if you want another report, I think that would be a good idea if you agree to extend out the timelines to make it more implementable. That's really what the piece is. And then the only other thing I would say is that there likely would need to be a small appropriation in the budget bill for the new members, but maybe not, because we're going back to 4 meetings as opposed to 8. So we just want to take a look at that. We might have enough with what we already have, because they were a smaller group, slightly smaller group, meeting for a longer time. So the current appropriation probably would work, because now it's a slightly bigger group just meeting for a shorter period of time. But I just wanted to highlight that. We can actually take a look at that and have that back in terms of our assessment of that on Tuesday as well.
Okay.
That's it.
So the one thing that I think, I could be wrong, the majority of this committee will push is, given all this literacy work, we are interested in having a full-time person there ongoing, and concerned, we don't put names with positions, but I know Ms. Lesh is there. I don't know if she's being funded through ARPA dollars. This might be a conversation with Senator Kitchell, but I think there's gonna be a lot of work to do. We know how much you're all working. We know how much Mr. Careless is working. So we're gonna push for that to become a more full-time something permanent. Thank you.
Yeah,
I am hearing you.
Great.
should be.
Yeah, and where the vehicle for that could be approached, but I'm more inclined to put it in yours or this or one of the literacy bills, as well as get it in the big bill once it comes through. So.
It is not currently in the governor's budget.
Right, and we have a request into you for not coming in this week, given that it's gonna take a little time for the House to get their feet on the ground with the budget, but the following week to come in and share your budget request with the committee. So.
Yes.
So just for a heads up.
Yep, and currently that position is funded through ARPA dollars.
Right, and that would they would run out when?
This coming September.
Okay. Thank you. Please.
A couple questions. So in hearing the testimony, I think I've heard the answers to these, my questions, but I'm going to kind of get them validated. So one is, AOE requires a continuing education program for maintaining licensure. I think the answer was yes, some of which are funded by AOE and some of which are funded personally. Is that an accurate summary?
Well, all of the so current, without these literacy modules we're talking about. So currently, it is the responsibility of the educator and often the district, I think, Andrew and Josh, assists with educators individually to keep them up to date and current with their continuing education. They're often given a professional learning budget and things like that through the school year. Josh or Andrew, anything you'd add there?
Absolutely. So for someone with a level 1 license over 3 years, they would need to meet 45 hours or 3 credits. And so that can be anything from out of pocket. I think all this, LEAs in the state will offer some sort of continuing ed reimbursement, at least partial, to cover that. And it is there's also tons of free opportunities online. So, and then for someone with a level 2 license, I think it's 90 hours over 5 years. So these modules for someone with a level 1 license, it would cover that requirement.
Okay, good.
And that is free. The modules are free, so no one would have to pay for those,
Okay, very good.
LEA or the individual. Mhm.
Second question is, do you have literacy modules now? And the answer I thought I heard was yes, but they're dedicated primarily to literacy instructors. Is that accurate?
That's who they were targeted for, I believe, because we had to use our ARPA dollars specifically focused on academics, and this was the way we did it. And so I think that's who's, for the most part, they've been sort of socialized to our teachers, particularly our teachers in younger grades, to make sure that they have a good understanding of from K through 3, they have a very good and high quality understanding of literacy, both development for students and then also some preliminary aspects of best practices in literacy instruction. And that's kind of what I was saying about like some of these modules, we could do some work to say, like, these are the ones we really want this particular endorsement to take. So they might not even all take the 45. We have to do a little bit of work on that. Or we could require that all, but I think we would agree if some teachers came back as a group and said, this is, you're asking us to do all these hours and it's most like some of these more advanced modules, like the ones that come at later in the sequence, I'm never going to teach literacy. Why do I have to take this? I think we'd understand that and would be happy to work with. And that's, as I said, we're going to ask that there's a list of endorsements and requirements regarding the modules or similar professional learning that AOE would generate.
Okay, good. Thank you. My last question is, it appears that the modules exist currently, even if they're commercially sourced, they exist, but you're holding back the potential for AOE to have to kind of spin a particular module for a unique Vermont flavor. Is that
They have their own modules they created. Sorry.
for all levels?
Yeah, so that's a little backwards, Senator Williams, because what we're doing for the individual piece is so that if an individual educator wants to meet this requirement using a different approved method than having to do the modules. So it's more to provide flexibility for a particular teacher. Does that make sense? Like if they had already met this requirement, they'd already had the professional learning and they could actually document that. Why we wouldn't necessarily want to force them to do a module if they actually could show that they had already had that kind of training. So the piece is really about the piece is really about or similar approved learning
Right.
Alternative. I used alternative twice. It's late in the day. I apologize.
Okay.
I think
But
maybe
yes, so these modules exist. We've already contracted with them as a state. They're there. We don't anticipate any need for a major upgrade on them for at least the next few years. I mean, the stuff we're talking about has actually been known for decades already in literacy development. So it's, again, kind of astounding to some of us that this is where we are, but it is.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, as a nation, by the way, I don't mean us particularly as a state. This is a national issue.
Anything else for the agency? So we'll look forward to just some written testimony that we can review as a committee on Tuesday. Mr. Feldman, when that comes in, if you could just print it up for us all, it'll take some time to go through it on Tuesday. I'm sure Ms. Hedges will be here in case we have questions. And then have you in for the budget a couple weeks, and we'll continue to work together to move these bills.
All right. That sounds wonderful. Pleasure as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. For me, at least, one of the things, I just don't see how we don't have push for a full-time literacy person. I think it's person's worth their weight in gold. I understand it's not the budget. But it's gonna be just a lot of work. I think Mr. Carroll does a great job, but we took them out for a drink, I'm guessing they'd say, well, not.
I get all that. but
Yeah,
I go back to my original question to Senator Hewitt.
yeah.
Why don't they just say we're gonna do it? Is it because we gotta make it a law, an act? So there's money connected to it so that they can get the funding for it?
There's some money attached to it.
Okay.
For example, the continuation of the literacy council.
Yeah.
Which we had, I think, 20 or 30 years ago, and then it disappeared, and we brought it back a few years ago, and that needs to continue.
I see.
And there are some bucks attached possibly to that. There are a couple of changes that they're looking for as it relates to reporting, that would need to be done legislatively. But yeah, so there are a few things that have to be done legislatively. And then if we were to move forward and say, we really need to have somebody, continue to have somebody dedicated to to addressing the literacy questions and the issues in the state, which again, speaking for myself, I'd love to see that person continue. We provided that person's funding through the ARPA funds, and that's running out in September, and that would have to be legislated.
And the money has to be spent, it's allocated for that.
Well, they're out of the ARPA funds for that, so this would be new dollars.
Okay.
Can we ask, Ledge Council this question though? 'Cause I think it's a good one, like how does the agency?
This is just for my,
How does the legislature and the agency, how do they interact or work together on these various, I mean, I know it's. Right, right, I know, but I mean,
Give us an example.
is it only when we're putting statute together or rules? Are those the two times?
The two times what? That's St. James Office of Legislative Counsel. Can I come up to the table?
And when we get money, when there are appropriations and obviously budgetary, okay, so
Well, anytime we mandate something.
but I mean, I just think Senator Williams' question is actually an interesting one.
So when you put something in statute, you write the laws, right? The executive branch carries out the laws. There's no way, whether you are experts in the field or not, there's just not enough time and humans for you all to be the agency of education and write the laws, right? So there's a certain amount of delegation in legislation, and a lot of that happens through rulemaking. But there's a certain amount of work that the agency is just gonna do because it is the expert, it's the agency of education. If it's not a required thing in law, right, whether that's coursework, curriculum, policies, then even if AOE were doing that work, their authority to require school districts or teachers to do something is very dependent on the authority you have given them. So if you have given them broad discretion and they use that discretion to require something, well then, depending on the circumstance, right, like this is very basic. Then the school districts or the teachers might be required to do that thing. But if you are not giving them broad authority, it's just something that everyone thinks is a good idea and AOE wants to do it, but there's nothing to tie anyone's hands, then you all would have to be okay with it being a discretionary participation model, right? But if you put, like, for this bill that we're looking at today, S-281, you are requiring the agency to do some work, but it is also requiring licensees to do something. So they could be doing all of this work, but there's nothing currently requiring licensees to do this. Now, there's an argument to be made that some of that could be happening through rulemaking, but I am not familiar enough with professional educator rules to know how specific they get. So long story short, it's a policy decision of how mandatory you want to make a lot of these programs, requirements, et cetera. And if you want to make it mandatory, then one way to do that is to put it in the green books. The other thing I think we've talked about a little bit is when you delegate rulemaking authority, you are delegating a lot of discretion. Some of that is just necessary, right? Because we are not teachers.
Yeah.
We are not experts in education. We're not experts in fish and wildlife, right? So we delegate a lot of that authority. But whoever you are delegating that authority to, those people are going to change, right? Some of it, you're delegating authority to governor appointees, right? Who serve a certain number of terms. So that authority might stay the same, but the whims of the board may change, right? So the rules could potentially be changed. And I don't know how familiar you all are with the LCAR process, but the legislature doesn't have a lot of authority to say, doesn't really have any authority to not enact rules, they can object to rules that agencies are putting through, but that doesn't make the rule ineffective. It just changes some of the burden if there was a challenge to the rule. So, it's a lot harder to change the law than it is a rule in some aspects, right? Like you all have to draft bills according to certain rules, and then you have to vote it out, and then your colleagues on the Senate floor have to vote it out. It has to go to the other body, and then the governor has to vote, right? There's a lot of hurdles there that there aren't rulemaking. So a lot of this is delegation, how comfortable you all are with delegation. But you write the rules, the laws, and the executive branch carries it out. Does that
Thank you.
answer your question?
Just codifying my brain.
Oh, codified, look at that.
I mean, that was
Pretty good.
just what I was looking for.
It's all a policy choice.
We need to get you a bumper sticker. It's
Yeah.
My favorite part about this job.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else? We have a lot of work to do. But looking at that board, I think we're gonna get there, but we're gonna get there. Some of this stuff, we'll have a tidy some of it up by the end of next week. Including literacy, get close. We won't get there maybe 100%. But I think Senator Gulick I know she's working very hard with Ledge Council and her team. And we're gonna have a conversation next week and update. We'll have their notes on this. Yeah. Anything else? Okay,
ice cream.
yes, please, I'm sure it's still there.
Did we miss it?
Probably melted.
Are we off?
No.
Oh, sorry.